Today I'm going to be going over a barbell squat. Now, personally, I think this is something everybody should be doing. If you're trying to develop your physique, improve performance, whatever it is, it's a phenomenal compound movement. I would argue one of the best compound movements there is. Great for training your lower body, developing strength, explosiveness, etc. But it's also a very challenging movement. So you get a pretty good calorie burn out of it compared to a lot of those super isolated movements. And because it is working such large muscle groups, I think it's just kind of good for confidence as well, because it's usually something we can all progress in pretty well as long as we know what we're doing. So that being said, you essentially just have two types of barbell squats, a barbell back squat and a barbell front squat. Now you can do various different stances with it, but we're just going to go over the basics of each of those squats today. So a barbell back squat, as far as bar position, I usually recommend kind of right where like your trap meets your shoulder. You have a little bit more cushion there as opposed to putting it up too high. And then when you start to put it down low, you're going to be at a higher, you're going to be more inclined to lean forward a little bit because that bar has to stay over your center of gravity to maintain balance. So right about in the middle there seems to be the most comfortable, and it's also the position that's going to be the least likely to have you, especially if you're inexperienced, involving too much of your lower back and straining something. As far as setup, hand placement, more or less is going to be wherever's comfortable. If you can grip a little bit closer, I do recommend gripping a little bit closer, because that's going to help you pinch those scapula tight packing together, which is going to be good for just creating a little stability in your upper back, but it's also going to be good for creating a little bit more of a shelf, give you a little bit more padding for where that barbell is going to be set. If you're a bigger guy, or a bigger person, I should say, I guess anybody could be bigger, and you have a little bit of a hard time grabbing in close because maybe the shoulder mobility is not as great, you can of course start wider. Again, it's not going to terribly impact the movement, just if you're able, grab a little bit closer. From there, it's pretty simple. Just going to be unracking it. For a traditional squat, I would say feet more or less shoulder width apart, toes just slightly canted out. Now, as you come down, a lot of times you'll hear people saying drive through your heels or different things like that. You want to really be driving through your full foot. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of struggle with this one, is they try too hard to compensate driving through their heels because they don't want to be leaning forward, or they're not paying attention at all, and because a lot of us tend to be quad dominant, if we're not doing a lot of training, we end up leaning in too far forward, and we're driving too much through the balls of our feet. So displacing too much one way or another can throw off your balance, but you're also going to be getting a little bit less muscle recruitment out of it, so you're not going to be as strong through the movement. So from there, pretty simple. Just squat down, push those knees out slightly, so you just don't want to let them buckle, and up. As far as depth, I usually recommend trying to come at least to about parallel, and by parallel I mean your femur parallel to the ground. If you're comfortable going a little bit lower, I don't see an issue with it. Some people might argue that, but at least try and hit about parallel. If you're not comfortable hitting parallel, start off with a box or maybe some stacked up plates, or whatever you have available to you to be squatting down to. Obviously something that can support your weight, so that way you have something to kind of, I guess, give you that feedback when you're getting low enough. So if you had a box to be doing a box squat, you're coming down, and then once your hips touch, then you know it's time to come up. I also don't personally recommend setting up where you're walking out and then having to back up into the rack. I think it's easier to back up fresh and then walk into the rack when you're tired. I'm just doing this for the camera. For a front squat, you can do two types of grips. Neither one's right or wrong. Me personally, I think the second grip I'm going to show you is a little bit easier for me to handle more weight with. I feel more comfortable maintaining good posture with it. I've always called a genie grip. And basically, that's just arms across your body here. So to get set up, and now it's going to be for either grip. The proper position, ideally, you'd want to be able to, my center? Yeah. You'd want to be able to come out, walk out, in squat, without even holding the bar. Now, Obviously, for, I guess, making it a little easier on yourself to maintain proper positioning, holding on the bar is going to make it easier, right? Especially as you're advancing the weight a little bit. But that's going to give you feedback in terms of about what that right spot on your shoulder that should be, because it's going to be resting kind of on your front delt there. So once you have that nice position, you're just going to bring your arms back, cross them over the top here. I like to push my thumbs into the bar, and then just still trying to keep your elbows up as if your arms were still straight out. Down and up. Big thing with this, with either of the grips, whether it's this one or the next one I'm going to show you, you don't want to let your elbows drop. If your elbows drop, then all that weight is going to roll off your shoulders and shift onto your biceps. You don't want to have to try and hold this up with your biceps, especially again if you're going heavier. The secondary grip is going to be a rack grip. So this one, again, kind of depending on your comfort level as far as your mobility, how tight your lats and triceps, and all sorts of things are going to play a role. But basically, about a shoulder width grip, maybe just slightly outside of shoulder width is usually where I would go. You want to be able to get at least 2 fingers on the bar. If you can't get at least 2 fingers on the bar, I would suggest just working on the mobility a little bit, and you can do things, honestly, just unracking and just focusing on driving your elbows up and improving, just that alone is going to help improve that mobility a little bit. Because if you can't get at least 2 fingers on the bar, you don't really have much to, I guess, be giving you good feedback in terms of maintaining that grip. You're going to be at a little bit higher probability of slipping with it. But anyway, I like to go 2 to 3 fingers. I'm not quite mobile enough to do 4. If you can do 4, awesome. If you can do your whole hand, even better. But here, you're going to drive your elbows forward before you come underneath it, so you're going to let your shoulders roll forward a little bit, and then step up into it, get set, and then again, pushing those elbows up and forward as you're coming down. And that's it. Now, as far as the body posture for a bar or for a front squat, you are a little bit more upright just because of where your weight is loaded. Maintaining your proper center of gravity, you're going to be naturally more upright with it. As a result, it does load your quads a little bit more. So that being said, some people do feel a little bit more comfortable doing a bit more narrow of a stance on a front squat and then a little bit wider of a stance on a back squat. Again, play with what feels right. I'm not going to say one is necessarily right or wrong. There are going to be, I guess, benefits to all the little nuances with it. Only other note would be the only other note would be regarding, I guess, your hip posture. A lot of times you hear people say, your knees should be staying behind your toes. This is more or less accurate, but of course we all have different limb lengths, and so that's going to create a little bit different lever actions. So a little bit of wiggle in terms of if you're coming out just a bit past, as long as it's comfortable, as long as you feel your glutes are activating, as long as you don't feel anything straining the joint, you're not leaning forward, you're not driving through the balls of your feet, you're still maintaining good pressure throughout the entirety of your foot, I wouldn't be too focused on that. Because if all those other things are lined up the way they should be, your glutes are activated, you're driving through your midfoot and the heel of your foot simultaneously, you have very good contact with the floor, your hips aren't caving in or anything, your upper body posture is appropriate, you're not straining, as long as none of that stuff is happening, you're probably going to be in the ballpark of where you should be with regards to your hip posture. Now, if you feel like you're getting a lot of load on your quads, especially with the back squat, and you're not really getting any load in your glutes, it probably means you're leaning too far forward, or maybe you need to adjust your stance a little bit. There's a lot of different things with that. And usually it has more to do with tightness than anything else. So I do generally recommend doing, if you do feel that way, doing a little bit of active stretching before you start your working sets with a barbell squat. Now, if you feel phenomenal through the range of motion, everything's activating the way you think it should be, I wouldn't worry too much about it. So very simple. I'm going to try and keep these a little bit more simple overall, and then I guess people can give feedback if they want me to be more in depth, but I tend to be long-winded, so I'm doing my best to make these easy.